Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Westin MCAT podcast. This is your host, Molly. And this episode for our Cars Reading Skills Workshop, again, we will be joined by Jack Weston. Jack, it's great to see you again. How's it going?
You too, Molly. I'm doing great. I'm excited about today's daily passage.
Yes. So today's passage is titled Mother Mound, and it's the passage for today, which is April 28th. Jack, what do you think of this passage when you read?
It's so interesting how different Cars passages can be, right? On one hand, like last week's passage was pretty straightforward, very, very easy to read. This is not difficult to read, but it leaves you scratching your head, like what's important, what's not, what is the
Yeah.
author's opinion? The authors are not always going to be very direct, and they won't always be vague. They could be in the middle. And I think this is kind of in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a really awesome passage to be doing today because really it feels very factual and it feels very like historical. It's a great comparison or like foil to what we were talking about in our last Cars Reading Skills workshop, which was a very opinionated passage, right? That author from the last episode was very opinionated, getting in there with words like fatal mistake and strangling, expressways strangling communities and cities. This one we can see a very different side of cars. So I'm excited. I think this is going to be a good passage to go over today.
Awesome. Let's go for it.
Let's go for it. All right. So starting off paragraph number one, Nanewaya, mother mound of the Choctaw people, has been venerated for centuries. All right. So first sentence, we get our subject, which would be this mother mound of the Choctaw people. And it seems like it's important. It's venerated for centuries. That might be a word that some students are familiar with, some students aren't. We don't really get much other context. Jack, what would you say for a student reading this first sentence if they didn't know what venerated was?
I think you can guess.
Yeah.
I think you can guess. Okay, so let's just start off with the first like word. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce this, right? But Mother Mound is another name for it, of the Choctaw people. So
Hmm.
I'm just thinking, okay, Native Americans, is that the Choctaw people? Okay,
Hmm.
so has been venerated. So it sounds like a good thing, right? I always
Yeah.
think, okay, does that sound like a good thing or a bad thing? Kind
Yeah.
of sounds like a good thing. Venerated, eh,
Yeah.
it's hard to exactly put words to this, but I would say it sounds like it's well regarded. Sounds like
Hmm.
it's revered.
Hmm.
That's the kind of word that kind of fits in with what I'm reading. That's what I'm getting at so far. But if I don't get it, it's not the end of the world. As long as I know we're talking about Mother Mound, and I don't know where Mother Mound is. I don't know anything about it, but I do know it's something of relation to a Native American tribe. I think I should be good to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's mother mound. Hopefully you feel about it the way you would feel about your mother. Um, but we'll see, right? We'll see as it continues.
That's a good
So,
point. Yeah, that's a really good point. And also mound. What is a mound?
I mean, like a giant, like a, I don't know how to describe it other than a mound, like something sticking off the earth,
Yeah, like a
like a
hill
bump or like a hill. Yeah.
or something. I don't know, but you get the idea that there's something there that they care about, that they look at for centuries, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, let's learn more. So, the mound, focal point of their origin stories and the figurative heart of the Choctaw homeland, is today in a state park in Winston County, Mississippi. Okay, so the second sentence answers a lot of the questions we had in the first one. It is an actual mound, and it is part of their origin stories. It's culturally significant for this people. So, Jack, you're seems like you hit it spot on with the idea you had for venerated. And we also get where it is. So it's in Mississippi.
Yeah,
Cool.
figurative heart.
Hmm.
I mean, that's the mother thing you were talking about, right? You
Yeah.
you keep your mother close to your heart. figurative heart of the Choctaw homeland. Okay, got it. Now I have an idea of what this is. And you're right. Focal point of their origin stories. So
Hmm.
they're associating this mound to their origin in some way.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
Must be important, right? I mean, if someone asks you where were you born, you're going to be very excited to mention where you're born. And if someone
Hmm.
says, "Oh, I just visited so and so hospital," first thing you'll say is, "Oh, I was born in that hospital," right?
Yeah.
And so it sounds like it's a profound, significant location for these people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the figurative heart. Love that. Okay, let's look at our next sentence. It says the archaeological history of the site is little known, with no substantial excavations having been conducted there. Okay, so some context. We don't know that much about it, but doesn't sound like that changes how significant it is to these Choctaw people.
Right. Again, just more factual details. They haven't done any sort of archaeological findings. Archaeological sounds like what? Like digging, right? Like
Hmm.
they're looking for things and they don't find anything necessarily, or they haven't been doing anything of that nature. Okay.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay, so from surface artifacts, it is known that the first occupation of the site was in the Middle Woodland period, which was between 0 to 300 AD, which is most likely when the mound was built. Cool. So we're getting this from surface artifacts because we haven't really excavated down from the last sentence, and we're kind of understanding when this period was occupied.
See, this is the kind of sentence that most students will not realize it's an opinion, but it really is an opinion.
Hmm.
How do you know that this is not factual?
Well, the word that stood out to me from this sentence is that it is known. Like, is it truly known from things that are found at the surface? But also the most likely.
Mo
Those are things that are standing out to me.
Yeah, when we read this, we may go, "Oh yeah, okay, it was this first place started out around 0 to 300 AD, right?"
Mm.
Okay, but look at how the author characterized this information with with some sort of hint at not knowing, right? It is known. It's not factual. This is something the author thinks or believes based on surface artifacts. That's not very obvious. Like that's not even if we had written testimony. That might not even be good enough for us, right? And yeah, the most likely gives it away that we don't really know, we're guessing. And so you have to be careful with what you're reading and make sure you know exactly what is a fact and what is an opinion. And this definitely looks more like an opinion, a claim, than it does an actual fact that we can just remember and understand and believe, right?
Hmm.
This could prove to be very important as an arguable defense for the author or something the author argues against. We'll have to see. The author isn't necessarily saying this is their point of view, but this is what is basically this is what people believe, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's also important to note that it was so long ago, it's hard to be certain about stuff that was
That's the thing. It's not like
0 AD.
right. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really important to point out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, our last sentence of paragraph one, it says its pyramidal shape is similar to others from that period, such as Egomar Mound in Mississippi and Pinson Mounds in Tennessee. So, yeah, maybe this is like the author kind of trying to solidify their point of like, hey, other mounds that were built in a similar time period look the same. So I'm right. But I feel like in doing so, maybe it kind of casts doubt on whether the author is really that certain or if they just think so.
Right. Yeah. I mean, overall, again, we don't really know if it's similar to others of that period. That's also kind of an argument. Maybe it's not similar, and maybe it doesn't resemble. Maybe that's your subjective opinion that it resembles it, right?
Mhm.
So far we have two opinions, not neither of which are really obvious or bold points, right? They're not bold. They're just very nonchalant. They're very calm about it. Oh yeah, by the way, um, this Nanaue was built, around 300 AD. Oh, by the way, it resembles these other mounds. right?
Mhm.
I mean, if you're not careful, you would miss this, and this could be important for questions. Okay,
Mhm.
sounds good.
Okay. So let's take a look at our next paragraph. It says occupation continued into the late woodland period, lasting about or until about 700 AD. So, okay, right. It's kind of building on our timeline from the previous paragraph, right? We said people got there between 0 and 300 AD, and it continued until 700 AD.
Okay, sounds good. Again, kind of, we don't know, we're not sure, but that's what they believe, or what at least that's what the author believes. Go ahead.
Mhm. Okay, so though the site is often referred to as Mississippian, which is 1000 AD to 1550 AD, there does not appear to have been any occupation during that time. So again, just kind of discussing on timelines some more. It's not Mississippian, is what I'm getting.
Yeah, and that's the author's point. Hey, it can't be a Mississippian. I believe it's 300 to 700 AD, not 1000 to 1550 AD.
Mm-hmm.
So the author is making this central point throughout the passage so far. When was this made? When was this used? Right? And
Mm.
so we need to keep track of that. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so well, let's look at paragraph 3, right? And we'll see if we continue on this timeline journey. It says variously translated as stooping hill or place of creation, both of which are quoted. Nanawaya measures 25 feet high, 140 feet wide, and 218 feet long. Okay, so at least half of this sentence is very objective. You could certainly measure that 25 by 140 by 218 feet. But it's interesting to get the translations. Stooping Hill, place of creation, kind of feels like what we were talking about with the origin stories. Um, and again, it's a hill. I think this sentence is mostly, for me at least, just helping me visualize what's going on.
That's it. There's nothing here.
Yeah.
It still talks about the origin. I would keep track of that. When I would keep track of that. I mean, it's not in this sentence, but I would know that those are really important. But outside of that, this is very objective. This is factual, right? The measures 25 feet. There's nothing there. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, at one time, it was surrounded on three sides by a circular earthwork that was 10 feet high and encompassed about 1 square mile. Okay. I mean, I'm not sure at what time they're talking about, but again, it seems pretty just descriptive. Again, it's a lot of dimensions. I'm assuming these are things that could be verified, but again, feels just like things to help us visualize.
Okay. Yeah. Nothing really crazy going on. Just more stuff to visualize.
Yeah. So a visitor to the site in 1854 reported the barely visible remnants of several smaller mounds nearby, which by that time had been all but obliterated by plowing. So, okay, cool. So in 1854, there may have other or been other mounds, but they are not there anymore. Again, not sure how much we could really pull out of that sentence.
Right. Okay.
Okay, one last one in paragraph 3 here. Portions of a smaller mound to the north of Nanawaya are still visible today. So, okay, we still have a small remnant of another mound. Um, Again, it kind of seems like we're just describing the site. These things are a lot easier to verify than when it was occupied, for example, right? It's a lot of
Yeah.
measurements.
Yeah, just very much descriptive, right? Describing the site. There's nothing really going on in this paragraph. And that's surprising because usually you're going to find one or two major points in each paragraph. This paragraph was very dry and nothing important. I doubt they'll ask questions pertaining to this paragraph because the author is not making any specific claims, any kind of bold, even nuanced claims.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're not going to ask you like what is the area of Nanawaya and ask you to calculate. This is
Yeah.
cars. So,
We'll never
yeah.
trick you on that. This is a conceptual test, not a detail-oriented test. So we'll never ask you, oh, was it 140 feet wide or was it 100 feet wide? That's not
Yeah,
what we'll
exactly.
never do that. Okay.
Exactly. Okay, well, let's look in our next paragraph. So this is paragraph 4. It says from the 17th century on, the site was a place of homage, revered by the Choctaw as the central location of their origin stories. So we're back to the origin stories, and we're saying that people revered it, right? That word is nice and significant. This is a significant place for the Choctaw people, which we mentioned before, but certainly mentioning again here.
Yeah, same, basically the same argument we made in the first paragraph, but very direct, right?
Mhm.
Definitely something the author claims.
Yes.
So very important for Choctaw, and it's basically their origin stories. Okay.
Mother Mound. Okay, so during the 18th and early 19th centuries, offerings were taken to the mound and placed in a large hole at the top. So, okay, it's describing how the mound was used by others, it sounds like. This is much later in the history than we were talking about earlier. This is the 18th and 19th centuries, but again, maybe just building on why it's significant to them.
Okay.
All right, the small mounds that were noticed in 1854 may have been constructed by the Choctaw for their dead or to represent the origins of individual families. So we're calling back to the earlier, small mounds, but it sounds like really the significance of those, according to the author, is also this origin story piece. So it's
Yeah.
all pretty cohesive so far.
Right. It says may have been constructed by the Choctaw for their dead. We don't know. This
Hmm.
could be an argument, right? Because we don't really know, or to represent the origins of individual families. Again, relevant to origins stories, very relevant to what we're talking about. You could say that this is a claim, but
Hmm.
not it's not far off from what we've already talked about in this paragraph.
Hmm. Okay, let's see what the last sentence of paragraph 4 adds. It says there is the possibility that the mounds were proto-historic. So in parentheses, 1550 to 1700s, or perhaps even woodland, but all clues have been lost to the plow. So the author's basically just saying that they're not sure when these are built, right? We don't really have the details or the knowledge or the clues to figure out when these have been built. So I'm not
Right.
expecting that to be super valuable.
Right. And late woodland period was 780, I think they said in the second paragraph. So
Hmm.
woodland would probably be where they were talking about 300 to 780, somewhere around there. So again, we don't know when, but the author's guessing it's 300 to 780. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's take a look at paragraph number 5. Um, the Choctaw appeared to have made no real ceremonial use of Nanawaya, even though it was centrally important to their worldview. Hmm. Okay, so this is giving new context that we did not have before. We're not just saying that it's important to their origin story anymore. We're saying, yes, it's important, it's centrally important to the worldview, but there is no ceremonial use. So we're kind of clarifying, yes, it was important, but they didn't use it for ceremonies.
That's interesting because if you ask me, when they talked about celebrate revered, right? And they talked
Mhm.
about origin stories, my mind went into, oh, they must have ceremonies around it.
Yeah, me
Right?
too.
That's like the typical way most people think about something that you love, right? You celebrate the things you love, right? You
Hmm.
celebrate your birthday because you love your birthday, right? You celebrate
Hmm.
a marriage, you celebrate, I don't know, graduation because those are significant moments in time, right? And so here the author's saying, well, look, it was tied to their origin stories and they do love it, but they don't do ceremonies around it. And so
Hmm.
this could be some sort of cognitive dissonance from what we always think about, right? And so
Hmm.
we're not bringing in outside knowledge is really important and not assuming things because the author never did say precisely that they celebrated around this mound or they did anything crazy around the mound. They just said they loved the mound and they saw it as their origin story.
Yeah.
So this is very direct and more direct than anything we've read so far.
Hmm.
And it seems to be a point that the author really cares about. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so our next sentence says their traditional religion is very private and they conduct few public rituals. Okay, so maybe this is also part of the fact that they're not doing any ceremonies there, right? If their religion is very private, they're not going to want to, have these religious rituals if they have them in a public area. So
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
building on it.
Yeah, exactly. No rituals, very little rituals. So by saying few public rituals, right? What are they saying? They're basically saying they don't really do ceremonies and they're not doing that's a good way to support the idea that Mother Mound, Naniwe is not necessarily a ceremonial place. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, unlike almost every other group in the Southeast, the Choctaw apparently did not have a green corn ceremony, the annual first fruits and renewal festival. So, okay, again, they don't use ceremonial or they don't have ceremonial use of this mother mound. It doesn't sound like they really use ceremonies at all. Maybe not just not with this mound. They don't have this green corn ceremony that others do. Can't say that they did none, but it sounds like that's something the author's trying to, make us think of is maybe they just didn't have
Right.
that many rituals,
Right. It's
at
an
least that we could
example
see.
yeah, an example of a ritual or ceremony that they're not doing to support the point that, hey, they didn't use Mother Mound as a ceremonial place. That's an argument. We don't know. What if they
Mhm.
did? What if they did use it as a ceremonial place? We have no idea. This is a bold claim.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, especially considering the date range. Again, this is not current times. Um, yeah, totally agree. Okay, the only well-documented public religious activities have to do with the burial and veneration of the dead, which mostly appeared to have occurred elsewhere. Okay, so this we're saying they do these religious activities with, honoring their dead, but again, this does not happen in Nanawaya. So it's the same situation that we've been discussing. It's a private religion, and they're not using this site for those ceremonies.
What I notice for history passages is they typically discuss the opinions about the history or figure out the history through opinions.
Hmm.
And so it's this is definitely the latter where they're trying to figure out history through whatever they have in front of them and through, some sort of opinion-based model. Um, and I think that's where a lot of students get confused. They go, well, when do I know it's a fact and it's not a fact? Because in this case, we're challenging or we're questioning what happened. That's an opinion. When we question or when we try to emphasize a point about the history, that's an opinion. But if the author mentions something that's happened in the past and then brings up a point about it, that's that's not necessarily like challenging the past. It's more about figuring out what the past represents, right? And so
Hmm.
this is sort of interesting in terms of how they approach the passage and how you need to look out for arguments.
Hmm. That's very profound. I like that. Okay, let's take a look at our second to last paragraph. So this will be paragraph number 6. It says their traditional religion is one of communion with spirit guides, human-like animals who appear in many southeastern stories and impart knowledge and abilities characteristic of particular animals. Okay, so this is not necessarily talking about Nenewaya, the actual site. They're discussing the religion, right? So we've got spirit guides that, help lead us through this religion.
Cool.
I-
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see how this relates. It says Choctaw traditional beliefs are structured by the tales elders tell to the young, and that include, among others, the origin stories. Hey, back to origin stories, right? This actually would relate to Nanawaya.
Yeah.
Let's see. All
Yeah.
right, and then we see,
We're going back to that, right? Origin stories.
yeah, we've come back to that multiple times in this passage.
Right.
Okay, then we get a sentence that applies. So Nanawaya was never the center of any major religious ceremonies. Hey, that sounds really familiar, right? That was one of our ideas from our fifth paragraph.
That's so clear.
Yes.
Like that's what we were talking about in the last passage we did together last week. When
Hmm.
something's clear, that's important.
Hmm.
And this is something that's been brought up multiple times, which means it's significant to the author.
Yes.
If I had to guess what the main idea is, what would you guess so far? Like what?
Probably that, right? It's important. Nenawaya is important, right? And we have talked about origin stories a lot, but the author's making a point that this was not used for religious ceremonies.
That's it. That's it. So yes, there's really two main ideas. One, yes, it's important for origin stories. But secondly, more importantly, which happened later in this passage, which could happen, right? It's not for religious ceremonial reasons. Okay?
Mhm. Yeah, it's kind of like clarifying how and why it's important. It's like, yeah, it's important and has this significance, but it's not important in this other area.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, and you're right. The even first sentence of paragraph, what was that? 5 was very clear. So I've said this very clearly twice now in this passage. So our last sentence of paragraph number 6 says it was simply there, a fundamental part of Choctaw identity and a place of reverence, but not of religious ceremony. That pretty directly summarizes exactly what we just said, Jack. It's
Yeah.
it's
That,
fundamental to the identity, but it's not a place for religious ceremony.
and I love how it said identity. So that's the word associations that we have to make, right? Identity means origin stories to the author. Right.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. And ceremony is the same thing as religion. That's not necessarily always the case. I guess it is. Ceremony is usually tied to a religious thing, but yeah, I mean, they could use the words interchangeably, I guess. So yes, you should know them as the same, one and the same, religious or ceremony.
Hmm. Okay, well, let's start our final paragraph. So this is paragraph number 7. It says in the 1840s, the Choctaw Claims Commission investigated U.S. non-compliance with the provisions of the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek, which is also, in parentheses, the 1830 Removal Treaty. Okay, I have no idea where this is going at all. Presumably, this has something to do with Nenawaya, but I don't know. Feels like a pretty new direction that we're moving in. I'm waiting to see how this applies.
Yeah, usually MCAT passages can end in three ways. They can go into a new direction. They can kind of just
Yeah.
stop whatever, or they can summarize everything. And
Hmm.
this seems like it's going in a new direction, but we have to keep reading to see.
Yeah. Okay, let's see our next sentence. It says many of the older Choctaw, when asked where they were born, responded that they had come from the mother mound, Nanawaya. So again, it's to these individuals, at least as far as it sounds in the sentence, not just like, oh, that's where my origin is, right? This is what they said when they asked where they were born. So it feels like, again, a place of very strong significance. Like, this is
Right.
where I was born. This is where I originated.
Right. They weren't really born there, right?
Right.
These people in 1830 or 1840s, when they went into this commission, they just said that because it, like you said, it's a very important place for them. So
Hmm.
it's emphasizing that, right? I would say I'm born there. It matters to me. This sort of reminds me of Avatar. Uh, like I forgot what it's called, but like there's that tree that, that was really important to the people. I forgot the name, but that just it kind of reminds me of that. But okay, cool.
Okay. One last sentence in the whole passage. It says, writing years later of the incident, J.F.H. Claiborne said, and this is a direct quote, many of the Choctaws examined regard this mound as the mother or birthplace of the tribe, and more than one claimant declared that he would not quit the country as long as Nenawaya remained. End quote. That's the final sentence of the passage. And again, it's just continuing to hammer home. This is a very culturally significant place. This mound, Nenawaya, is the birthplace of our tribe, right? This is the birthplace of our tribe. So again, it fits into our earlier discussions about why this is and is not, or is significant, but, how it was significant to these individuals.
Yes, and this is a very clear example. An example is never a list. An example is when it's a drawn out story, and I can see the story play out in my head, right? These
Mhm.
older Choctaw going into this commission, talking about where they were born, and so yes, this is a very good way of the author supporting their claim that this is a very profound, significant place for the Choctaw people, yet they didn't mention ceremony in this paragraph, right? It's not
Mhm.
ceremonial. It's not religious.
Mhm.
It's more about their identity. It's more about their origin story. So
Yes.
perfect. I mean, if you know that, you're gonna fly through these questions, right?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, the main idea, what would you say if you had to summarize it for our students listening?
It's definitely that Mother Mound was an origin story that had played a significance in terms of the Choctaws' origin stories, but not religious ceremonies. Really, just no Mother Mound had nothing to do with religious ceremonies, right?
Mhm.
No real significance with religious ceremonies. Most questions go through will ask around that, and so you have to be careful and make sure you know that.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, as a reminder for all of our listeners out there, this is a discussion of the daily passage that we put on our passage or on our website every single day for free. We just, of course, went through the passage sentence by sentence, highlighting what is important to pull out. But know that you guys have access to all the questions that were associated with this passage. We highly, highly recommend that you guys find the link that's in the caption of this episode, or you could just navigate to the website. This will be the cars passage posted today. And you can give these questions a try, right? Certainly, that is the best way to test whether you understood the things that we were talking about, and whether or not you're ready to apply these topics when it comes to cars. So definitely check them out and give these questions a try.
Awesome job, Molly. Great. I'm excited to see how students go through this.
Me too. Yes. And make sure you guys, if you enjoyed this episode, to check out our other Cars Reading Skills workshops and to stay tuned for the next one that we do. Jack, again, thank you so much for being here. Students, thank you for listening. And we hope to see you again soon.